Hi, welcome to ECPG Live. Our guests are getting pulled up here. I'm your host, Tana Russell, the Assistant Director with Evergreen Council on Problem Gambling here in Washington State. And as you can see, we've got some great guest panels here for you today, tuning in from Nevada and Washington, D.C., but before I introduce them, please feel free to go ahead and leave us a comment. Tell us where you're tuning in from today. And as always, we do have our social media and PR specialist, Rob Maya. He is behind the scenes today, and he will be sorting through all of your comments coming in from Facebook and YouTube. So that's how you can communicate with our panelists today. And we ask that you keep your comments brief. That way, when he pulls them in on the screen so that the group can respond to them and so that everyone from both platforms and future viewers can see them, we just ask that you keep them brief. Otherwise, they cover up some faces. So with that, we'll get started. Also, we do have some resources on this topic for you already on our blog, which is there for you. And any that come up during this conversation, we will add. So please feel free to visit at the end, and we've got resources. So on the top right of your screen is Keith White. Welcome. He's tuning in from Washington, D.C. He's the Executive Director of the National Council on Problem Gambling since '98. We are an affiliate of the National Council. And before that, he was the Director of the Research of the American Gaming Association, among other things. Been in this industry about 25 years. Keith, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, at some point, I guess I've got to get a real job. But no, I love gaming, and I love working in the responsible gambling field. So it's fantastic.
Excellent, excellent. On the bottom left of your screen is Rob Selassie with IGT. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for all the good work that your agency has done for a lot of the things we'll be talking about today. He's tuning in from Reno, Nevada. He is the Senior Manager of the Product Management and Marketing Systems at the International Gaming Technology. And he's been in this sector for over 18 years. Anything else you'd like to add, Rob?
I don't think so. Yeah, it's an interesting role. I get to work with both casino operators and our internal product management and make sure that we pull in requirements and features and, cool things that, both the industry and players can use to have a better experience. So it's good to be here.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to have you. I'm very excited for this discussion. And on the bottom right side of your screen is Alan Feldman. He's tuning in from Las Vegas, Nevada. He's currently retired after a 30-year career in the gaming industry. He's a distinguished fellow at the International Gaming Institute at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and serves on quite a number of boards, advisory committees, faculties, etc. And anything else you'd like to add?
Just that if this is retirement, I'm working harder now than I was when I was in the industry. But I do want to at least give a shout out to Kaz Gaharian, who I see has joined us from soon to be Dr. Kaz Gaharian from UNLV. So it's good to see some participation from some of my colleagues. It's great.
Excellent, excellent. So Rob Maya is going to put up for us kind of an initial question to get us going. And audience, please feel free to start leaving some comments or additional follow-up questions for the guests. And we will just kind of answer some of those as we go through. So what are the current payment options and what would a completely cashless casino look like? Rob, would you mind starting us off here and setting the groundwork so everybody kind of knows how it currently works and how it might be different if everything goes cashless?
Yeah, sure. I'll give a run at this one, and I think it's a good discussion for the group. But suffice it to say, a completely cashless casino is going to take a little while to get to, but it's certainly quite an evolution from the days of compared to the days of coin compared to the days of tokens, right? I mean, we evolved, or really that the ticketing part of it was a revolution compared to where we were with coins and buckets and counting machines and those types of things. So that was really the revolution in adopting ticketing, industry wide. And now as we look to evolve, that sort of, options for players to use and operators alike to go cashless. And I'd like to talk through, I think, a couple of maybe 2 or 3 scenarios that we really see as rolling out to both properties and players. So the first one is what we call carded cashless, and it's taking your Players Club card from a property and using it once inserted into the game to fulfill a cashless transaction. Now, in all of these scenarios, you're going to have to set up, the player will, and the operator will facilitate that, the casino, a cashless wagering account. And once that is funded, you can use your card as a facilitating mechanism to draw funds from your cashless wagering account to the EGM, to the slot machine. And so that's certainly one option of a cashless casino. The other option is to go cardless, right? And this is when we get our phone. And if you look at people walking around these days are always going to have this device nearby. So it just makes sense that that's another evolutionary step. And at the same time, some people may prefer to use cards. Some people may prefer to use an app on their phone, right? That's facilitated, again, by the operator. The operator will have sorted out with a vendor of their choice how to facilitate that transaction, but you simply use your phone. It will have the Players Club card affiliated with it too. So you tap in, your loyalty program's activated, and then you can perform the transaction of taking funds from your cashless wagering account to the game, through your phone. So the last part of the equation is really using external funding, and that's going outside of your cashless wagering account to fund it. But you can get access to your bank account or a credit card or PayPal, and that's when you bring funds, into your cashless wagering account versus that external funding mechanism. So, yes, it looks a lot different than years and years ago, but I think it's merely evolving and adopting, common best practices. And certainly with the COVID environment that we're in right now, it really supports a more contactless experience too.
So I would jump in, and I see that the next question is, will this replace a Player Club card? I would suggest that it's actually going to become eventually part of the Player Club card. The thing that may replace Player Club cards entirely is facial recognition. And I'm talking about something that's way down the road in technology. I'm not talking about something that's in the works today, but I've seen some predictive technology of where this is headed. And for anyone who has traveled recently, you can see it in airports today. You no longer need a boarding pass. You walk past the scanner, it scans who you are, and you're on the plane. At some point, there's going to be pressure to adopt this kind of technology in all kinds of other circumstances, and casinos will be one of them, where you sit down at the machine, and just like your phone, the machine recognizes who you are. The machine connects to your loyalty card. Your loyalty card connects to your payment system. And now it's all one-stop shopping. It's all contactless. It's it's frictionless is one of the ways that that the financial industry likes to describe it. And for obvious reason, that's good and bad. We'll talk more about that later. But at some point, it's possible the Player Club card is going to go away as a hard 3-dimensional device in and of itself. But I see these things as sort of coming together and fusing together over time.
I think that the Players Club, it's important to think about both what Alan and Rob are saying. It's an account. It's a loyalty account, which is also your funding account, which is has the information on your play. I mean, we're moving towards just an account-based system and an account-based society. I think the one thing that's important to note is at least in Nevada, these account-based systems are going to exist in parallel to some debit systems where it's not account-based, where it's essentially anonymous, where it's just like making a purchase at a grocery store. You swipe your card. The bank verifies that you've got money in that card, but it doesn't verify that you are that a card holder. And so one of the things that we're concerned about with some of these systems, an account-based system offers, as Alan said, and we'll talk about later, much more possibility for information and control. But some of the debit systems and potential credit systems, which aren't account-based, really, I think, have most of the dangers of cashless without much of the benefits. And so, not all cashless, even now or in the future, is going to be these account-based systems that I think we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me just mention, if you see a Facebook comment come up from our agency, that would be our executive director, Maureen Greeley, tuning in to participate on the conversation. So she's always very involved with these, and we really appreciate that. So go ahead and keep your questions coming, and we will get to those. Here's one from us. What are the reasons for going cashless? Why now? Alan, maybe do you want to start us off there? Why is this conversation happening?
I think it's happening. First off, let's keep in mind it's been happening for a couple of years or more. And that's in large part because this is the direction that consumers have been pushing retail and financial industries in general. Consumers like the ease of the transaction, as I said earlier, this frictionless transaction. Any of us who are Starbucks fanatics, as I am, know that it's become much, much easier to just go into Starbucks and hold up your phone, it gets scanned, and you're done. And so it's, from a consumer point of view, consumers have been asking for it. Businesses have also been asking for it, as they've come to understand that it makes the business much easier to manage. Cash, it turns out, is very expensive. It's very expensive to count and account for and take to the bank. And you have to constantly be refreshing it, renewing it. So the business itself becomes a more efficient place when all of this becomes wireless, and it also becomes trackable and accountable. But the why now, specifically, as in like right now, is very much about COVID. It's long been known that the dirtiest things in a casino are chips and cards, except that the only thing dirtier than that is cash. And so, to a certain extent, it's been known, but no one's really heavily focused on it until now. And right now, it is a very central part of what's happening in terms of the public health approach to the reopenings. And you're seeing it in every jurisdiction, the reduction of interaction of players and cards, players and chips, and rethinking about how we're going to handle cash. And so I think there's this added, almost turbocharged review of cashless systems as a means of addressing public health concerns in the time of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from Keith or Rob on that?
Well, we'll get to this later, but COVID is it's double-edged sword, the wrong metaphor. But one of the other impacts of COVID is the increased risk for gambling problems. And again, we'll kind of get to that later. But COVID is both, we understand the imperatives for going cashless, but it is a time of higher and heightened risk, and it's important to balance those two things out. And I think that's that discussion that we're hoping to have, not through this webinar, but at the regulatory level, and at the operator and vendor level as well.
Yeah. And Maureen, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, talking about benefits and maybe not specifically why now, because I think that was addressed by Alan, but, there is a secondary benefit, just related to security, to have a cashless account to rely upon. There may be benefits of, putting winnings or the like into that cashless wagering account where they're safe and secure, instead of carrying theoretically a wad of cash out to your car late at night. So there are some, benefits to consider around that too.
Yeah, I sort of left out, there's clearly a generational difference. People of a certain age, and I may be the only one on the call, grew up before these things were, the central part of our lives. and we do everything on them. And I noticed it in all kinds of ways before we even started to talk about cash or transacting retail business, just in terms of accessing information. I was accustomed to getting it off a newspaper. My adult children wouldn't think to look at a newspaper, but they'll hop onto their phone and look something up right now. To some extent, it's the same with how they're going to transact business. And I have watched as my again, adult kids go into any number of environments, and for a $2, $3 kind of thing, which I would never think to do anything other than cash, they would never think to do anything other than a debit card or an Apple Pay kind of system. So there's this huge generational shift in how we even look at cash. And one of the reasons, and one of I guess it is a benefit because it is security. People just don't like carrying cash on them. It's just not safe. You can lose it. It can be taken from you. It causes problems. And so not having it can be a big benefit.
Mm-hmm. And I know Maureen posted something about data, which we'll get to in a minute. So we'll hold on that.
But I see Brian's comment too. That's something we're definitely going to be touching on. So it's
Brian's
noted
ahead
for
of
sure.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kasra, thanks for tuning in. She asks, could these card play cards potentially be used outside of the casino to pay for gas, groceries, coffee, etc.? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. And it's just going to depend on how that particular system is set up. I suppose an argument could be made that there is some sort of regulatory benefit to having an account that is gambling specific, so that all of the activity is just for gambling. You can track and observe simply gambling behavior. There's another point of view that says, hey, gambling is one of many other kinds of transactions and should be treated accordingly. And yes, you could still isolate the gambling behavior, but it actually also, wouldn't it be kind of interesting to see how that fits in with a lot of other behaviors? So I think the answer is technically it could be. Part of it is going to also be the regulatory requirements as to whether or not it can be.
And let's be clear, casinos already offer branded credit cards, and I do think as all this stuff becomes digital, it'll be a matter of what you're linking to which account. And, it's going to be fascinating to watch and evolve. Yeah. So I don't know, there's going to be cross-selling. We know that airlines buy databases of gambling credit card loyalty holders and vice versa, so I do think it'll be fascinating to see how that works. But the data is, I think the data is everything, and it's how we use it that's really going to make this either net positive or net negative.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Brian. Thanks for tuning in. He asked,
hey,
plus it allows easier ways to put restrictions on spending and gambling limits and even time limits with alerts through a smartphone or through the actual machine.
Yep. And that was going to be our next point. If we can get to that next question, what are some of the responsible gaming implications for this? And I think, again, Alan and Rob have talked a lot about the potential consumer benefits, the benefits to the business. We're not Luddites. We believe that with new technology comes new opportunities, and that a lot of the things that have been mooted or that Rob has built into his system, involve things like setting limits, involve things like facilitating self-exclusion. We really look a lot at, as we said, the data, and thinking about data visualization. We know that's a powerful tool that the consumer finance industry uses to help customers, just general credit card users, understand how much of their spend goes to restaurants versus groceries. Data visualization with a responsible gaming bent could be incredibly helpful at showing you that over the last month, your deposits or your time on device or whatever have just skyrocketed. And again, a smart operator, could then use that information to tie back to some responsible gaming, some customized, personalized, responsible gaming messaging, even intervention. So I think there's a tremendous amount, One of the challenges is the technology is there, but neither the regulation nor maybe the will is. Most of this technology is still, you've got to opt into it. It's not opt out. And we know from a lot of behavioral economics across hundreds of disciplines, when you give someone, when it's opt in versus opt out, uptake is going to be incredibly low unless you incentivize folks, unless you make it kind of part of the design that they have to opt out of. But again, it's a discussion that's happening real time now.
I noticed that one of the comments here from Troy Green is the notion of linking things together, and well, there it is. I'd point out that this is one of the enormous potential benefits. Right now each state has an exclusion list.
Yeah,
and that even assumes that those exist. In Nevada, we currently don't have one. So conceptually, in Nevada, you could go to one casino, exclude, you'll be excluded within that company. But if you go to a casino in a different company and across the street, you're fine to continue. If you're in Massachusetts and you exclude, you're excluded in the 3 casinos in Massachusetts, but you cross the state line into Connecticut and you're free to continue. One of the potential advantages of this is the potential for exclusion among financial institutions. So now you're excluded among the banks that accept Visa or among the banks that accept MasterCard, these huge financial networks. And now all of a sudden you're talking about what all but amounts to national exclusion or national limit setting. It could, again, want to stress this is potential, it could be an enormously powerful benefit. But to Keith's point, it does get into a matter of what gets turned on, either from a regulatory perspective or a legislative perspective, how these things actually get implemented. Rob and his company at IGT have an incredibly comprehensive set of tools, responsible gaming tools built into their program. But not every operator turns those tools on. Not every jurisdiction even requires them to be turned on. So that's part of the give and take that I think that we have going forward.
And to Troy's point, I think our friend Omer Sitar with now Sightline Gaming, is really deep in this. He says a person might have 20 different casino loyalty cards, but they probably only have one bank account. And look at payments level view of consumer spend and responsible gambling is another big tool. It's not going to be the be all and end all, but it can be a very powerful cross property, cross company, cross jurisdictional means of doing things like self-exclusion and spend. And I should say that we've been involved in this since in 1999. The National Council got together with what was then Global Cash Access and developed an exclusion program that is still running to this day. And you can register your card if you're the card holder, and it will be rejected at any Global Cash Access terminal, or Sightline terminal, or every terminal. I'm sorry, they're every now. And so, but that's only, of course, for every. So it needs to be extended to other payments providers and other vendors. But the seed, as Alan said, the seeds of this are there. There's a lot of potential, and it's up to us as advocates to help realize that potential.
Yeah, Keith, it's interesting that, one thing that, cash doesn't really allow you to do is to track your limits, track your spending, and have evidence in a document, right. Whether it be a report or, a limit, as you said, a gentle reminder that comes up on the, player interface screen, on the service window, on the game screen, you're getting, close to your limit, right?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. So, with the technology, and I understand with the access, it can make people think about this, but there are benefits, right, with the technology, sure. From a tracking and taking that anonymous spend into one that is fully trackable and smarter.
Yeah, Rob, I think this is a really critical point. There are absolutely risks, and we'll get into more of those, but we can't kid ourselves. Cash is one of the tools that some people can use who are either on the low end of the spectrum of being affected by gambling harm or at the very high end of the spectrum of being affected by gambling harm to get around, being caught or getting themselves out of that cycle, because it allows them to keep going. And the fact of the matter is that cashless becomes a pretty effective tool to put some limits on that and possibly even put some real governors, some real stopping points in place. So it's not a panacea. It's not perfect, but we can't kid ourselves that cash is doing us much favors in this regard.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get into the risks. I see we've got some questions coming through kind of along those lines.
Oh yeah, Rob and BCLC. So we've got, Vancouver, well, just for Evergreen, just across the border. But yeah, Rob, this is when we think about the risks, this is a perfect segue into some of them, and I'll take a first shot at this. But obviously, frictionless, means that there's less forethought, and we know people with gambling problems tend to be highly impulsive. And I think, as you say, there is a lot of consumer research to show that there's a salience to cash, that forking over the dollar bill after dollar bill can be, for some people, it can be a mindfulness, and that credit is just so easy. Credits are just So I think we look at things like velocity of spend, speed, ease of access, and clearly we've never been a big fan of saying that placing an ATM 15 or 16 or 22 feet or whatever those regulations are from the slot machine is necessarily protective. We've never said it's 15 feet's good, 14 feet's bad. But when there is a break in play, that does allow time for reflection. I don't think that's the be-all and end-all of responsible gaming. I think responsible gaming starts, in the house. It continues through point of sale, and it goes on afterwards. So making frictionless, I think, increases some risk a little bit. But as Alan said, there's always risk, and I don't think that placing artificial breaks in play is necessarily the best way to go about responsible gambling. I think there's a lot of other things we can do. But that said, some of the systems we've seen are going to allow, instantaneous and constant access to funds, really with little limit. In Nevada, it's $10,000 a day with no limit on the amount of transactions. So there are very few bank accounts that could withstand someone literally just swiping their debit card over and over again. Yes, they might have money in that account, but not for much longer. So I think there's we can all think about this risk, but I think those are some that we've been looking at, and that our responsible gaming payments guidelines are designed to try and mitigate. And it can never eliminate, but it's using the tools we have to try and mitigate and reduce harm and kind of signpost people to where they need to be.
Someone is going to accuse me of saying this in total self-interest, but at the risk of doing it, I'm going to. One of the biggest risks is that we're going down this road with very, very little research.
Yeah.
And on this last point, who in God's name knows if 10,000 a day is the right amount? What if it's 1,000 a day? And maybe it is 10,000 for some people, but maybe we should let them prove that over time, as opposed to starting there for everybody. And let's find some appropriate measures of that so that we're not just throwing the door open to everybody. And I say that because no one's ever looked at any sort of measurement of transactions. What if we ended up finding out that of 10 million transactions, the average per day was $750? Why on earth are we setting a $10,000 a day limit? It makes no sense. I mean, we're all but inviting problems for those who are affected by this. So I'm concerned about going forward without much research. There are clearly privacy risks. I think Chris Soroti had brought it up in the chat earlier. If data is hacked, if accounts are hacked, what's going to happen then? Well, this isn't going to be any different per se than a credit card account getting hacked or debit, checking account being hacked. But you still have that concern. There is still that vulnerability, and so. And lastly, I think it's a risk, I suppose, but I think that we have to look at cultural barriers and we have to look at generational barriers. because now we're talking about this public health motivation for getting this done. It can get to the point where cash is banned. How do you acclimatize consumers to doing this and make them comfortable with it? So I don't know if that's exactly a risk, but I think it's something we've got to be sensitive to as we move forward.
Well, and I appreciate Alan bringing up research, because it is something we're engaged in is a very massive, high-speed experiment. I think by the end of the year, most gambling jurisdictions will have gone cashless in some way, shape, or form, to the extent that they, some of them already are. And it's being done. Regulators aren't even pretending to pause for research. No one's even asking what the data shows. Not the least of which, because there's not a lot. What there is, of course, shows that it's highly problematic for people with gambling problems. But it's almost as if we don't even need the research now. Why are we even going to bother with? We need to do this. It's commercial imperative. And I think there's a lot of risk there, because even the responsible gaming tools we talk about, I think they'll be effective. I suspect, there's been some small trials here and there of limit setting that have shown promising results. We don't really know. I don't think there's going to be negative impacts of these tools, but I mean, this is it's a massive experiment without any data, and the data is going to come maybe 2 to 3 years down the road, if it comes at all. And I think that's going to be late for some people. That's going to be tragically late for more than a few.
Mm-hmm. This might be a question for Rob, I don't know, but if the cashless casino systems do allow for this generation of much more data, how would individuals that work outside of that particular facility be able to benefit from that data? Not that they need access to any player records or anything, but to be able to see what's happening since cashless casinos went into effect at this facility. What are the trends? How would someone outside of that facility be able to access that information?
It's a good question. There's not really a great answer at this time. Obviously, each property will take great care and mining their information. And to the extent, working with partners, working with regulators, that the information can be shared in a way that makes sense to the operator, because they're very sensitive to that. Each operator is very, very sensitive to that information. It's very private, and there's even, some rules, around that. But the overall data to the experiment, I think, will become evident to the industry at large. Maybe not right off the bat, as Keith mentioned, but it will become evident over time, the types of trends that are happening and the things that we really need to buckle in on, to make sure we're delivering on the promise of the safety, on the safety and the responsibleness of it. To be mindful and bring forth a thoughtful approach. Mm-hmm.
And I think with data, knowledge is power, but knowledge may also be liability. If you have a customer that now has done an NSF transaction hours, if you know that they're down their literally last dollar, is there liability there? Is there responsibility, and is there liability? Because those are separate things. But it's interesting to look at. I've heard, and this is a very informal statement, but I've heard that up to 10% of debit transactions at casinos now hit NSF, non-sufficient funds in their account. I think that was a shockingly high number to me. There's lots of reasons why you might not have the proper funds in your account. You might have just forgotten or blah, blah, blah. But I'm not even saying all that's indicative of a gambling problem. But we just don't know. We have no idea. And again, we're kind of running into this with our eyes wide shut, I think. And but we'll see how it goes.
I completely agree, and I would love it if it's okay, Tanner. I would love it if Keith could maybe run through the principles that the NCPG has put forth about this, because I think it's completely germane. Though the only thing I would do in advance of this is to say that, again, we're talking about data. We're talking about the availability of information that we would never have if cash were running the system. And so we're seeing this also in online. And I appreciate online gambling also brings with it risks that are different and unique to an online experience, but it also brings data. It also brings insight, the ability to track the kinds of things, as Keith mentioned earlier, about velocity, about frequency, about time on game. There are a number of things that you could take a look at. And I think we're going to begin to get the same kinds of data from these transactions. And when you start to compare them, I think that's where the rubber is going to meet the road. And we're going to find that there are going to be a number of people whose gambling activity has increased, whose transactions have increased, at different times of day or different days of the week. And all of a sudden, a different kind of picture is going to get painted. We're not trying to do a behavioral analysis of anyone. That isn't the point. The point is whether or not there's some sort of variant in what otherwise becomes normal play. And it's that kind of analysis that I think is really what holds the greatest benefit for everyone. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't help the casino company to have problem gamblers playing, because they're going to not only they're going to cost themselves enormous problems, but at some point they're going to end up causing the casino a problem too. And that could be a public relations problem, or it could be a financial problem. It's understanding how to get to that, what data matters and what data doesn't. Yeah. And that's why I say the lack of research here is really, really frustrating. Yep. But anyway, if I asked you about the principles, maybe that's
I'll talk about. They are, you can find the principles and they harmonize pretty closely with the AGA's principles on the Evergreen blog, so they've already posted it there. So everyone can go see that. I'll just, hit one or two things. We've talked about data a lot. One of the principles is that the data should be de-anonymized or de-identified, anonymized, and protected, but then shared with the regulator or shared with a third-party researcher. Because as Alan said, and he's absolutely 100% right, that's what's going to allow us to look through thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of data points and start to separate the wheat from the chaff, because the holy grail has always been not necessarily even to find what's predictive of a gambling problem, but to look at what's protective for a gambling problem. What is it that helps the 95% of people be able to gamble, some cases very heavily, even daily, without developing problems? And and then how can we accentuate those factors? I mean, yes, we focus on the risk side, the pathology side. We have to. It makes sense. But these large data sets that encompass more than just play behavior, that encompass payments, that encompass perhaps other types of consumer behavior, that's going to be the key to help us unlock that. It's not, as Alan said, it's not the reason to go cashless, but it's a byproduct of. 10 years ago, we were very frightened. I think many of us in the field were frightened about the impact of online gambling. And the large data sets that several companies provided to the Harvard Transparency Project really helped open everybody's eyes, because third-party researchers went in and said, what this data shows, the vast majority of online play is moderate. Because, anytime that the industry says, most people have problems, my old boss, Frank Fahrenkopf, used to say, trust but verify. And so by providing this data in an anonymized fashion into things like the Transparency Project, you're going to allow independent researchers to come in and verify that probably the vast majority of payments activity is going to be non-problematic. But we won't be able to, we don't know that until the folks from the outside come in and can prove that. And so I think, again, there's enormous opportunity to demystify a lot of gambling. So I won't go through our risk factors or our responsibility factors, except to say that data is a big part of it. And I think the industry would do itself an enormous favor by committing publicly and finding mechanisms to share that if they want these approvals to continue, if they want this discussion to continue on a without the myths. That would be a great way, because otherwise there's just a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear on our side about cashless. There's protective factors. But anyway, so sharing that is going to enable a whole lot of things to happen that I think are all positive.
Mm-hmm. One thing I've heard mention is, what about people that don't have bank accounts? Is there a way for them to continue to play cashless without a bank account? And the risk there would be an unintentional cultural bias that comes out of going cashless. Is that something that has been in the discussions or works?
Well, remember, you can have a cashless experience as a player without having a bank account or without having a credit card, but you do need to fund your cashless wagering account, which is the foundation of a cashless wagering, cashless gaming experience at a property. Again, you have to establish that with the casino, probably at the cage. It might be opened when you open your loyalty account, but you have to fund that first and foremost. And then the external funding bit, which, you know, again, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and from casino to casino, may or may not be adopted. So we have to wait and see. But that's merely an external way to fund that account that you could fund with cash or, you know, anything at the property itself.
I think it's going to be fascinating in a short space of time, a year, year and a half, 2 years. The people that show up on the floor with cash are going to be the absolute ones that we focus on for AML and know your customer. Because most people, most recreational gamblers that have legit sources of funds are just going to use these cashless technologies. And it's the folks that walk up with thousands of dollars in crumpled bills that are going to draw a lot of scrutiny. So yeah, I mean, as we said, I think the cashless is going to happen very, very quickly. It's going to be widespread, and it's going to really call those attention to maybe those are some people who are unbanked. Maybe those are people who are getting their cash through illicit means, but I suspect most recreational gamblers are going to quickly shift to this technology, and it's going to stick out like a sore thumb when it's just going to be the opposite now. People walking around the casino floor with cash is quite common. Soon, I think very soon, it's going to be really, really odd to see.
Yeah, and so
nice segue to what's going to happen next.
Yeah, so as this is progressing, what can we expect to happen next? And I know this is such a broad question because it's really going to vary across the nation, but what are some things you all are expecting? And Rob, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, I mean, we're really focused right now. We have some field trials to conduct. There, you know, a lot of times with the regulatory approvals, you need to, you know, focus on the regulator, and then you might need to, you know, field trial a product at a particular site. So we're really focused on providing our regulators with the right information that they need to evaluate and hopefully approve this technology in their jurisdiction, so it can begin to be adopted by casinos.
I think you can expect regulatory meetings on this topic in at least a dozen states over the next month or two.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see it moving quickly. I do think I would say that not all cashless technology and systems and policies are equal, and that the system that Rob described and that we've all three been talking about, an account-based system, offers tremendous more responsible gaming, AML, and KYC advantages. Because I think some of the systems but what some states and what some operators and vendors are probably going to push is just setting up a swipe on every single slot machine. And it's anonymous. And like I said earlier, I think it offers none of the benefits of account-based systems, but all the risks for problem gamblers and for money laundering and for know your customer. So, you know, don't let be fooled, but all cashless is not created equal, and be very, very, you know, we're going to have to do a lot of work within regulation, within very technical details, stuff that I don't understand that Rob might, but there's a lot of nuance here, but it's really important to pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Rob, Maya, if we could pull over Chris's comment, I thought he had a pretty good question. He asked, what about remote registration? Can I create a cashless account from home before I head to a casino, or will I need to do it on property? Good question.
It is a good question. I suspect. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
Go, Alan. I defer to you, but I'll listen to your response if I have anything to add.
Well, I think registration is an issue that is going to be handled on a state-by-state basis. However, I think that by and large, registration is going to have to include identity verification in person. The challenge of it is whether or not it actually will include identity verification at all. And that's one of the things that's really frustrating, is the notion that you can, in effect, while you're in the casino, so we know that you're over 21 because we can visually identify that you're over 21. But I don't know your name and I don't know your address, and I have no unique identifying number, which is generally a driver's license or passport, social security number. But you've handed me $500, so I've put $500 onto your so-and-so gambling card, and now you go off and into the casino and you're basically anonymous. I think that's an issue. Unfortunately, that's possible right now in a couple of places. Now, that's different than remote registration that Chris is talking about, where you literally do it at home. In this case, you would have to be doing it in person, and you may have to show ID to prove your age, but that's different than whether or not we know who you are and you're sort of being tracked, if you will, based on who you are. Because in that case, it's just an anonymous account.
Well, and I think this gets to Chris's point too, in that there are systems out there. There's some folks, vendors particularly, that want a system that is portable. It's an open loop. It's not a closed loop system. So you've got one gambling account and you use it at this property, and then you go to the next property, and then you go to the next state and you use it online and do this. You buy lottery tickets. There are other, mainly in the operators, who want a closed loop system. That, yeah, you fund your account and only at my, that only works at my property. And it gets back to the comment earlier. Will some of these systems allow you to use the money for non-gambling purchases? And again, there's a real split. Some folks say absolutely go buy dinner on this, using your casino points or your app. Other folks want again, you can't use a Starbucks app to go next door to Pret a Manger, but you can use your Visa card. So and I think all of these things are going to be happening at the same time. There's going to be national level platforms. There's going to be global platforms. There's going to be company specific platforms, state specific platforms. And the interplay and intermesh amongst that is going to be fascinating to see.
Real quick on Keith's point, the technology will allow you to have a wallet, having a wager, cashless wagering account. And if there are wallets within what we call Resorts Wallet, where you can, add funds for your gaming account, then you can have funds for a retail account and then disperse those funds accordingly. That's technically very possible, and actually a product that we support. The other thing is, as it pertains to the remote registration, I don't think in the foreseeable future we'll see that. But one of the benefits of this technology is that you will be able to, once you get home, once you've established account, when you get home, you can log into the account and you can see your balances, right? You can see your activity, you can see your balances, you can see how much you played, won or lost. And so that's a capability that was not there before on a strictly cash and or ticket based platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think our last kind of question, what might be Rhonda's that was just up on the screen. She just asked, would this be used in state-ran businesses as well? And your thoughts are?
Yeah, well, it's already happening. Sure. So one of the most aggressive people using with cashless right now is the Ohio Lottery. So at any of their instant ticket vending machines, which we also call unattended ticket vending machines. So these are vending machines at, not just convenience stores, but rest stops. So there's hundreds airports. So you can, airports. You can put in your credit card or debit card. They've set a limit. I think it's $100, $500 a day. But so that's a state run. That's the state lottery. That is literally the state of Ohio. $500 a day, basically anonymous credit card to buy lottery tickets. At a location that is by definition not overseen by any human. I mean, these are kiosks. These are vending machines. So to Rhonda's point, yes, states we know are eager to get into this business. It's not just going to be the private industry. It's going to be state lotteries. Yes, is the answer. I think it'll be state by state, but that's where everybody wants to go.
All right. Well, great. And I think for some of the comments and questions we didn't get a chance to get to while we're going, because we're about 5 minutes over where we normally like to end at our latest. This is just such a good conversation. We will follow up with our guests and see if we can get some more answers for some of those additional questions for you. So again, that's going to be on the blog, all in one spot for you. So check back there in the next few business days, and we will get those up there for you. Thank you to all our viewers who have tuned in. You guys were amazing. Thank you, all of our guests. It's such a pleasure having you all with us. It's fantastic. I learned so much just listening to you all and your expertise on this. So I'm looking forward to keeping an eye on what comes around the corner.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, everyone.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.